Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 ICPSR Data Fair. We're happy to have you join us today for this webinar. We'll be talking about harnessing AI for metadata, the TurboCurator story. Jay Winkler and I are your hosts for this presentation today. Hey, Jay. Jay's dog is in the background, but I really couldn't hear Jay's dog. Maybe he'll make himself known. Jay is an associate archivist at ICPSR, and I am the managing director of the NSF-funded Research Data Ecosystem Project. So for a little bit of context, the backdrop to the story that the work that Jay is going to share with you later started with the ICPSR receiving the largest National Science Foundation award ever made in the social sciences. This award is focused on modernizing the social science data archive software platform and building tools to support innovative research with social science data. This is a seismic shift akin to when the technology moved from punch cards to hard drives. If any of you remember that, I do. That gives you a sense of how old I am. And when complete, the research data ecosystem will be a modernized software platform capable of working with different data types in ways that were previously not possible. As you might imagine, ICPSR has been bringing in data to the archives for over 60 years. Each one has its own code base. It's a very complex system to maintain and sustain. So creating this modernized platform that can be used by all the archives and on which tools can be built to benefit all the archives will benefit both individual researchers and the entire research data community. When the research data ecosystem is complete, you will have an enhanced user experience for ease of use across the research data lifecycle. You'll be able to use tools like TurboCurator to make your data fair. There will be a modernized platform that will provide enhanced security so you can safely and securely access data, both on demand and restricted data. You will be able to deposit and search for diverse data types like video data and geospatial data. All of this will also enable supporting collaborations for new scientific discoveries and sparking innovation, which you'll get to see as Jay gets into his part of the presentation. Here is a representation of the research data lifecycle. We describe the work we're doing metaphorically as building the research data superhighway. There are stops along the way, along the data lifecycle highway, with tools for the research data community to deposit, enhance, and discover research data. The tool we're discussing today is TurboCurator. As noted in the webinar description, data depositors often provide insufficient metadata. TurboCurator is a tool to help researchers add metadata to their data deposits, and it's helping to make data fair. Specifically, it will, FAIR acronym, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So specifically, it will help data depositors generate research titles, descriptions, and keywords. So my plan was to show you the TurboCurator video. However, let me just see if I can get this up really quick. It's only about a minute long.
ICPSR.
Hold on. Let me do this and shift. Where's the functionality? Stop share. Share. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay.
TurboCurator. Create metadata using AI. Titles, descriptions, and keywords. Make your data more findable and reusable in a few clicks. Harnessing the power of next-gen technology. Using a standardized thesaurus developed by the world's leading social science data archive. TurboCurator can be enabled on any Dataverse instance. Ask your administrator to enable.
This graffiti was sprayed on a synagogue.
Okay, are we back on the PowerPoint now? Okay, great. Thank you. So TurboCurator uses OpenAI's ChatGPT and the worldwide metadata standards in use at ICPSR. And this will ease the burden of data documentation for users who are depositing data and improve the overall quality and discoverability of your research. So we're 2.5 years into the research data ecosystem, which is a 5-year project. And we are finding this work is sparking innovation throughout the ICPSR data archive system. So when we wrote this grant for this project, when we started this project, ChatGPT wasn't in existence. As soon as it was released, we began experimenting with its capabilities to see how it could be used to help make data fair and accelerate the work on RDE, the research data ecosystem. Jay Winkler, an archivist with the metadata and preservation team, works with the ICPSR technical team on the development of TurboCurator. This is the TurboCurator is its first iteration, and it will continue to be worked on. He and his colleagues have taken the knowledge gained through this work and are pushing further at the question of how do we know we're getting better metadata through tools like TurboCurator. So without further ado, I would like to turn this over to my colleague and archivist innovator, Jay Winkler. And Jay, you can just tell me when you want me to shift the slides, okay?
Thank you very much. All right, so my name is Jay Winkler. I'm the metadata librarian at the ICPSR. And today I'm going to talk about a project myself and 3 other researchers undertook to build a tool that harnesses ChatGPT to reduce the burden of a specific aspect of metadata generation on curators, and then we evaluated that tool. The project team was myself, ICPSR Director of Metadata and Preservation, Jared Lyle, and then from the University of Michigan Flint, Caden Picard and his advisor, Murali Mani. So curation is the process by which the ICPSR enhances data sets that are deposited for release. This can mean a lot of things, from cleaning up code books to fixing variable and value labels. And relevant to us today is metadata generation, which is also largely performed by our curation team. This is what helps people find our data in the catalog. So I like to refer to this as a silent collaboration between our depositors and our curators. Curators are very reliant on information that the depositor suggests, but they have the freedom to dig through what was provided to repurpose it or make small edits so that it fits our metadata standard. Our metadata standards are now publicly available, by the way. The better metadata we get from the depositor, the better equipped our curators are for using it in our system, but they are also skilled at making it work with what they've got. Next slide, please. So one of the hardest fields to fill out is our subject terms, our keyword descriptions that link studies among similar topics. So our curator's first stop for subject terms is the ICPSR subject terms thesaurus, a very large list of subject headings that we've gathered over the years that is loosely based on the Library of Congress subject headings, if you're a libraries person. Ultimately, no one has it memorized. I certainly don't. So it's sometimes hard to pick out the subject terms that work best for your study. So we were interested in, because we had this narrow use case that we knew was sometimes difficult, we were interested to see if ChatGPT could provide quality suggestions in this narrow use case. Next slide, please. So the Flint team is not here to represent themselves today as far as discussing how the tool was actually developed. It was developed kind of in parallel with TurboCurator. It was parallel thinking that we have now that we're done with our initial evaluation. We've sort of started thinking about how the next step for this project should be better integration into what everyone else at the ICPSR is already doing. But if you're interested in the actual generation of the tool we were using, there's a link on the screen to the version of this presentation I gave at iAssist in Halifax, which was great, by the way. But Caden discussed that in more detail. So this all came about as Caden and Morale of U of M Flint, they were interested in testing ChatGPT on a data relevant use case. And they approached Jared first, and Jared brought me in on it. We narrowed our scope to subject term generation because one, it was an area we identifies as a potential difficult for curators, and also we thought because we knew the outputs would be restricted to our thesaurus, it might give us a little bit more basis for evaluation than a more free texty field like summary. So the idea was that we would submit the study metadata, typically the summary or abstract, to ChatGPT, and the output would be both terms from our subject terms thesaurus, some external thesauri, and then terms generated by ChatGPT itself. You can see one of our example prompts here, but all of our data is available on GitHub through the link on your screen right now. Next slide, please. So we provided them with our subject terms thesaurus as well as sources for external thesauri we were interested in testing. They did a great deal of rewriting the prompt and eventually built us this front end where we could enter a summary and, excuse me, where we could enter a summary and get the returns from ChatGPT. So the front end would look like this, and then next slide, please. And then it would provide the subject terms. Once the tool was built, we were able to begin the assessment. I'll note here that the tool is currently not active. We're exploring the next steps for this project and how we integrate our work directly into TurboCurator going forward. Next slide, please. So the ICPSR had two questions that we were really interested. Are the results consistently presenting suggestions from the ICPSR subject terms thesaurus? Can the prompt successfully restrict its output to thesaurus terms? And two, if so, are the terms appropriate for the studies we're asking it to describe? Are the suggestions actually good enough to be helpful to curators? Next slide, please. So Caden built the web tool, and it is great, but we wanted to do this 1,200 times, making the web tool really inefficient. So I used the ICPSR Object Export API. If you were at my presentation the other day, I used the beta version that's currently in beta to gather the abstract for 400 randomly selected already released studies. We were testing this on studies that had already been released and that had been curated. So I gathered those abstracts as well as the existing curator selected subject terms for those studies. I handed all those things to Caden. Caden ran the abstracts through the prompt, and he ran them at 3 temperatures. To summarize this really quickly, the high temperature is a value of any generative AI. It's between 0 and 1. The higher the value assigned to it, the more random the AI's outputs. So we did want to think about not only assessing the tool, but seeing what differences there were in some of the tool's standard parameters. So anyways, we did all that. So we ended up running 1,200 API queries to ChatGPT. I wrangled all those responses as well as the known metadata through Python data frames, checked if the terms ChatGPT selected were actually in the thesaurus, and then also whether or not they match the terms curators had selected for our test studies. And that gave me a bunch of data to start checking the tool's work and a basis to check it against existing values. Next slide, please. So let's start with research question 1. Can we get ChatGPT to only suggest thesaurus terms when we ask it to restrict itself to those outputs? And the answer here is a big kinda. You can kinda do so. Just under 40% of the ChatGPT suggestions were words that were actually not in the ICPSR study subject terms thesaurus. So we're calling these hallucinations. Hallucinations is a term in AI that somewhat generally refers to when AI makes stuff up. So we're calling any of these terms that are maybe sort of applicable, but aren't actually in the subject terms thesaurus. We're calling these hallucinations for our purposes. This is relatively consistent from study to study. The vast majority of the studies had 3 non-thesaurus terms in their 10-term output. And one thing I personally found really interesting was how frequently hallucinations recurred because we were testing each abstract at 3 different temperatures. We could see that when ChatGPT was guessing and when it was giving us terms that aren't actually in our thesaurus, it was doing it multiple times, which I found really interesting. So what do we do with this information? One, in the next version of the tool, we just filter out non-thesaurus terms before presenting them to curators. But the other thing we can do with this information is if a term, if we've tested a study against ChatGPT 3 times and it's given us more than once a potential term that's not in the thesaurus, one of our long-term goals is to use that information to say, well, maybe it should be in the thesaurus. Next slide, please. I did also attempt a subjective evaluation of the terms that are in the thesaurus, we're calling them valid results that ChatGPT returned. The biggest challenge here was volume. Ideally, I would have scored these somehow 1 through 5, but instead of just what I was actually doing was very much a binary. Is this good enough or is this way off? But that sort of more granular scoring is a future project. But a quick method of checking ChatGPT's work is checking it against what curators actually chose for that study. And we found about 20% of the time ChatGPT was suggesting terms that crossed with what a curator had already chosen for that. ChatGPT was finding at least some level of consistency with the human results, while also giving new, mostly valid suggestions. It didn't get information like fully wrong very often. It's one thing when it makes up a term that isn't in the thesaurus, but it's another thing when it's actually wrong, suggesting a term that is very obviously inapplicable to that study. That really only happened around 3% of the time. So the most common words were all things that sound right, but maybe the subject term has a different meaning than what the term is used in like general and for lay people. Like for example, maybe the summary has a little section about data preservation plans. That's a common thing to mention in a study abstract. And ChatGPT might return a suggestion for digital preservation as a subject term, but we want to reserve that subject term for studies that are about digital preservation, rather just using a common term in your summary. We have a lot of like word matching, but not necessarily subject matching in the invalid results. But those are, in the end, greatly outnumbered by the basically valid results. Next slide, please. So I think that discussion dovetails nicely into the reaction I got when I demonstrated the tool informally to a few curators. They emphasized 2 points about its potential implementation at the ICPSR. One, the curators still need to be the experts. There's a difference between consulting ChatGPT and saying ChatGPT is the expert. As long as we remain focused on how we help curators rather than replace a part of their workflow, the curators were interested in using it. And the curators also wanted me to note that this is still really depositor driven. The tool is going to work better for studies where we get more from the depositor. Curation can't use it to simply replace depositor provided information. If the tool doesn't have enough to work with, the results won't be good. Next slide, please. So to summarize, we're relatively encouraged by the initial results. We think this sort of limited focus integration of AI into standard curation practices could have value, and maybe curators, are interested in using the tool. Our next steps include evaluating precision, that is not just the terms that are good enough, but are they actually the best options for the studies involved? And then, how do we use this to impact our other work? How do we use ChatGPT to evaluate new potential thesaurus terms? How do we reduce the learning curve if we try to better integrate external thesauri? So Caden had built like the Library of Congress subject terms directly into the tool. And if we were to adopt that, or the ICPSR has often been asked to adopt MESH, which is a health sciences thesaurus. If we were to adopt some of these as external thesauri, can we use ChatGPT to lower the ramp up time before our curators are comfortable with it? And so as we consider how to adopt the tool team-wide, we'll have to consider not just short-term considerations for how to optimize it for curators, but longer-term ones about how to use it for real learning. And I think that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jay. And as you can see, there's a lot of really thoughtful work going into, I'm going to double word, right? Thinking about how the value of AI and where it applies. And so I guess we should just open it up to any questions that people might have. Did you get any questions when you were in Halifax, Jay, that kind of caught your attention?
I think that a lot of the questions I got in Halifax were from people doing similar work at their libraries, from people who wanted to figure out how to integrate AI in a way that is thoughtful and doesn't just rush into it so that you get to put out a press release that says you're using AI. So as we were having these discussions, and I know I mentioned this in the presentation, but one of the big keys that we all kind of agreed on was that we do need to make sure that the humans are the experts, and we do need to make sure that these are tools we are using to enhance our work rather than create our work. And we think that conceiving of it like that is going to be the way to make this actually work.
Okay, and actually, there was a Q&A box I was supposed to click into. So apologies to those of you who had put questions in the chat and I didn't see it. The first question was, is it possible to add TurboCurator to other open source repository platforms? And the answer is yes, and it does require working with the repository platform technical team. And so they would need a commitment on their part to do that with our technical team. Second question, do you want to add anything to that, Jay?
No, but I think I can.
You take those? Okay.
Yeah. So can the general public reuse the tool sometime in the future? I think you mean my tool, but it is integrated right now. I mean, the one that TurboCurator developed, which is slightly different from my tool, but ultimately has the same goals, is already available in Dataverse. Maybe Jeanette should actually be taking this question.
Mm-hmm. It's available in Dataverse. It's currently, so when it was released, the way that it works is that there are different instances, I can't remember how many in Dataverse, so the administrator of that particular instance would need to adopt it. And so it's in the adoption phase at Dataverse. And the reason that we created the tool for Dataverse first is that part of this NSF project is to create tools that benefit the whole data ecosystem. And one of the things we know is that if we create it for our system first, then it's very internally focused. If we have to do it for someone else's system, then we have a slightly different experience in terms of thinking about what other systems might need. And in fact, we learned a lot by partnering with Dataverse to do this initial, like I would call it V1 of TurboCurator.
So we've got a couple of questions that I think are really closely related. How has ICPSR considered using offline LLMs, considering that ChatGPT's constant updates may affect accuracy? And are there other models that may be better with this work? The answer to both those questions, the short answer to both those questions is yes. All those things have been considered. At the time me and Caden were working on this project together, I mean, honestly, ChatGPT was the one that was within our capabilities of accessing an API, and also within the very limited budget we had for this project. But yeah, as we think harder about how to integrate this more deeply into Curator, that is something that, that our how to integrate it into TurboCurator, that is something that that team is thinking very hard about. Another question I got was, how does the ICPSR think about other concerns around ChatGPT, such as data privacy and energy consumption? And I can't answer that question on behalf of the ICPSR, but personally, yes, it is something I think about a lot, actually. And it's one of the reasons that I've mentioned a couple of times that I was really interested in a limited focus use case. And, I think if we're going to use these tools despite some of these concerns, we need to have good reasons for doing it, and we need to know that it's going to work. But I also think the reality is that there's going to be further pushes into getting AI into academia. That's how it's going to go. And I think that being a person who knows a little bit about how these tools actually work and has used them and can say, okay, like I do see some use cases for them, does maybe when you do give pushback about things like data privacy or energy consumption, you're having a conversation that's not just being curmudgeonly. So that's one of the reasons I was really interested in doing this project, is so that I could give myself some credibility in part of those conversations as we do talk about the very real concerns around AI.
And I will say that that data privacy and energy consumption are absolutely part of the conversation on the technical side of the equation, as well as on the leadership side of the equation with respect to the work that we're doing with the research data ecosystem. There's a session this afternoon, I believe, with Joe Saul around some of these questions as well. So we've got our privacy and security officer, we've got our IT director, both of whom are concerned about both of these questions. So, and it can get very expensive on that energy consumption side. So, all right.
Those were all of the questions in the chat.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, I guess if there are no other questions, then we've reached the end of our time together, and we want to just thank you for joining us and hearing about the work that we're doing. Jay, thank you so much. The collaboration that you have with the technical side of the equation is hugely valuable. And so we really appreciate the fact that you're pushing on like understanding the quality and some of those aspects and really putting the research into it. A recording of today's webinar will be available in the Data Fair playlist within approximately 48 hours, like I said. And we invite you to visit the ICPSR Data Fair link to find the playlist and to register for the remainder of the Data Fair seminars. I believe the next one is about SOMAR, which is our social media archive. And I think that is at 12:30. So we hope that we will see you there. Okay, thank you very much.